FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
We are welcoming Ted Glaub, the president of the Arkansas Soybean Association. Welcome for Agripulse Leaders Forum.
Thank you, ma'am. It's great down here, it looks like.
Yes, it's a wonderful opportunity, and we're all inside talking about how we're going to get a farm bill passed. From the perspective of the Arkansas Soybean Association, what are some of your top priorities in trying to get the bill done?
I guess the biggest priority is knowing that we have a bill. The unknown is the biggest problem. Now there's lots of sub-problems and things like that in different areas of interest and concern, and most of the South being multiple crops and things like that. It's an extreme transition, I'd say, for Arkansas, going from historical government programs to less production type programs, more crop insurance. This is going to be a major change, and the lack of progress. We've negotiated one time, it didn't go through, and basically it's a big unknown.
And direct payments were continued in the extension of the Farm Bill, but when those go away, it's not really going to be an easy transition for a lot of your growers, is it?
Soybean growers won't be as big an issue, but our rice growers in particular, cotton growers, and most all of us raise those crops one way or the other in Arkansas. And again, the unknown and how to use tools. In the state of Arkansas, crop insurance hasn't been as cost effective as it has been in the Midwest, and that's going to create a new issue from us. On a personal basis, we're almost to the point that the historical farm bill program is obsolete, and I don't see us having enough political clout or influence to be able to update that, and we're going to have to go to other means, and not knowing what Washington D.C. will accept and what other institutions or organizations want, and coming up with a standardized, uniform, voiced policy is one of our biggest challenges.
What types of forward-looking risk management tools would you like to see advanced in legislation?
The simplest answer, I would like to see market indicated policy. In other words, the market to tell us which crops we need to produce. My simple answer has always been, what's the quality of my product? Where does it have its greatest value? And how do I get it there economically? So what products do we need to produce, and where do we need to send them? And there's lots of diversity and lots of changes, and that's life. We will change and adapt, but we don't want false policies and false indicators. We got a little bit of that in our market right now of outside funds putting a little extreme, and we're in a period of volatility. The existing farm bill is a cheap food policy, and it's worked. And farmers are making phenomenal investments and for very small returns. This is a very high stakes poker game. You're putting your whole net worth on the table almost every year, unless we have some kind of support or protection program. We can't afford those risks with these margins.
And I would assume you don't want false indicators from the federal government either in terms of having an influence on federal farm policy?
Yes, ma'am. Now this is Ted Glaub. In policy, we want the Soybean Association in a general wants to get rid of the direct payments. In some ways I go along with that, because it doesn't make sense to get paid a direct payment on 17 bushel to the acre when I'm making 60. And I literally have farms that we're doing that. And I have farms that we're producing crops on and we don't have that base. That data is obsolete. And I've seen 2 times in history when we were influenced excessively, and it was by crop insurance. One year cotton set an extremely high price. that guaranteed a profit, and we overplanted cotton. Another year was rice, and we basically busted those markets. We're suffering the same thing in the South right now on cotton. It's overproduced from the high prices we had 2 years ago. Now we've got an inventory that we got to work through. We need to have a system that gives us the proper indication to produce the amount that's needed and can be consumed. We've got to get rid of the product. And of course, in the soybean side, coming from Arkansas, I'm very interested in the broiler industry since we're number 2 in production. We want to be able to export a lot of our soybeans through our broilers in the form of proteins and open those markets too.
Let's talk about politics for a bit. You've seen a lot of changes, not just in Arkansas, but throughout the South. Tell us a little bit about the experiences that you've had growing up as a Southerner, and how the state of Arkansas has really changed in the types of candidates that they elect.
I'm not sure how intelligent we are. As I'd stated earlier, we were visiting. I'm an old blue dog Democrat, and my joke is I didn't know you voted for a governor. I just thought you voted for Faubus, because when I was a young kid, he was in office for 12 years in a row, and there was no reason to be a Republican until we had Rockefeller in the state. Everything was so Southern blue dog Democrat. All our local county elections were 100% Democrat. Now that has totally flipped the other way. The state chose to vote Blanche Lincoln out of the office as chairman of the Ag Committee, and that has hurt us in Southern policy. The loss of her representation of the Southern farmer, in Ted Glaub's opinion. We've seen the same thing. We were all Democrat on representatives. I think we're now all Republicans. We only have one Democratic senator, and again, I used to say a Southern Democrat was an Illinois rural Republican voting wise. They just had opposite parties, and we're seeing the dynamics of that change. We've also seen the changing of our representative areas, that our rural areas are being concentrated. 80% roughly of our row crop production is in District 1 of our representation. And i.e., if we had voted acres in the presidential election, we would have probably had a Republican president, but we voted people, and we have a Democrat. And we're having some of that changing in Arkansas. Rural areas losing population, concentration in areas, and particularly northwest Arkansas, one of our bright spot parts of the state of Arkansas, where you have Walmart, Tyson Foods, J.B. Hunt, and these type of industries, a lot of good healthy growth and that kind of stuff. One of the nightmare examples I use is the White River is one of the biggest boondoggles that you want to get into, and the reason I thought of that, northwest Arkansas, the first flood control lake, is fully allocated now for its uses, and that's allowed the development of Springdale, Fayetteville, and all that, because that water was available, and it's allowed the broiler industry to expand. And we have trout fishing that isn't natural for our state. We have duck hunting in the winter because these flood control lakes let water out in the winter. Rural farmers, we would like to use some of that water for irrigation to take pressure off our groundwater. There's all these conflicting political goals and objectives and things like that, and we're working against one another instead of sitting down and negotiating policy that works for everybody, and that's one of the biggest dilemmas I see.
Well, you bring up a topic that Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack has addressed in the past, and that is the relevance of rural America. So in Arkansas, do you think that soybean growers and farmers in general are considered still very relevant to the government officials in your state?
I think on the local level, we're still pretty relevant, but we've got a big job to show how relevant we really are. As long as that gallon of milk is on the shelf, John Q. Publix thinks everything's going fine. They don't realize how thin that we've gotten and how tight these inventories are. And the sad part of it is we may not be relevant, and the population vote may want to do away with cheap food, and then they're going to find out what expensive food's like. And I'm afraid we may go there because we can't continue to produce these crops with all the extra controls, restrictions, etc. And in our area, the things I think of, and again, the White River is just an example, we're really a little Holland in Arkansas. We're leveed, we've drained. Some of the best production land in the world is swamp ground that we cleared up and put into production, and it's the most productive. But we're going to have to maintain these infrastructures. And John Q. Public doesn't know how important some of these levee systems and things, the cost to maintain it, and we haven't done that. We need to get everybody aware of the seriousness of it. And I use the example 2 years ago, Pocahontas in Corning, Arkansas got flooded on the Black River. Some levees broke in about 8 places that they hadn't maintained in that time for 20 years. And it's just a deterioration of the system, the dynamics of the real world. We haven't educated, and we need help to learn how to educate the public how important taking care of the environment is, and the fact that those of us farm, we're more concerned about the environment because we're out there every day. Our life is dependent on it, and our children's future is dependent on it. So we're more concerned than they are. They just don't realize it.
Thank you, Ted, for that great perspective from Arkansas soybean growers. Thanks for joining us on Agripulse.
You're welcome. You have a good day.